Hi everyone, welcome back to my garage and to my channel. Today we're going to do a little project that we're going to use with our 3/4 ton pickup truck. So we're actually going to build some car and truck ramps. Now, it's a very easy process, and the reason I'm undertaking this is there are, multiple ramps you can purchase out there. They're made out of plastic and mostly plastic, actually, from what I've seen. And they're good, but I don't want to have plastic ramps sitting around between hot and cold and having to store them around. I like the idea of good solid ramps. So we're actually going to build ours out of wood, and I'll explain the sizes to you and some of the process and just take you through that process. Now, the first thing we're going to do is you can build these ramps out of 2x8s, 2x10s, 2x12s. I felt the best size was a 2x10. If you have a smaller truck, smaller car, you can use 2x8s. But we're using, our tires I believe are 265, 75, 18s. So they're a fairly beefy tire. And they're actually 8 inches wide. Hence why I'm going to use a 2x10. I want a little extra space for the tires to sit on. But the advantage of using the 2x10s as well is that if I ever needed to take a quick look under one of my other vehicles, and I didn't want to put it up on our hoist, and I think you'll probably just barely see there's a couple of hoists in the back, I can actually use a couple of these ramps to lift or drive up my other vehicles, and their tires are sports tires and they get fairly wide. So maybe if you have a Mustang, Corvette, other car like that you want to get a quick peek underneath, maybe you're hearing something, the 10-inch wide boards will give you a better width to put the wider sports tires on. Now, I'm making these ramps because I plan to use them for the truck to do oil changes. I like to do the maintenance on this vehicle for a large part, simple things, maintenance, greasing, etc. With the truck, I'm going to use these ramps. Reason for that, I have a couple of hoists. I have a big hoist that I can put this on, but it is a 4-post storage hoist, and we're currently mid-late February in Canada, and right now those hoists have cars on them. So rather than, take a day where I've got to pull a car off a hoist, put the truck up on, do the oil change, and then reverse it around, it's quick and easy to have the set of ramps. Now, a couple of tips before we get into some of the tools. The best tip I can give you, if you're going out to buy these boards, they're very easy to measure out. I'll give you the measurements in a minute, but you can very easy to cut with a skill saw or a miter saw. But the little tip is, if you're buying it from the big box stores, the Home Depots, Ronas, the Lowe's, if you go to the back of the wood aisle, they usually have large saws there. And most stores will give you a few cuts for free, or if they're really quiet, like our store posts 2 cuts, no charge, then you pay for the additional ones. But I have found if you go there when they're not super busy, they'll do 4 or 5 cuts a board for you if you have your measurements ready. And that's what we did. You're going to see 2 piles here because we used a 2x10x12 and a 2x10x10. Had the measurements ready, took them literally 2 minutes to cut it. So I'm bringing home pre-cut boards. This is also handy if you don't have your pickup with you. Maybe you have an SUV or a car. When they're cut down to this size, you can throw them in a trunk not a problem, and bring them home. Saves you a bit of work. Now, the basic tools you're going to need are a miter saw and or your skill saw, because we're going to want to cut, and I'm going to show you, you don't have to, but you're going to want to cut an angle on the end of the boards. If all you're planning to do is put your pickup truck on these ramps, you can leave them with a square edge, because the tire is so large, when it rolls, it's actually going to roll on top of this. But if you're planning to use it for a sports car, etc., this just gives a little nicer edge for that tire to hit and roll, rather than the square edge. So as far as tools go, that skill saw, you're going to need a drill, because we're going to want to pre-drill some holes. Of course, your square for marking, your measuring tape. I like to use a carpenter's pencil, but even just a regular pencil for marking. And then you're going to need, I'm going to come around to show you, you're going to need a couple of different screws. Really, you'll want some 2-inch screws just for the first board to connect to your base. And then you're going to want some 3-inch screws. Now we're using number 8 by, what was that, 2.5, and number 8 by 3s. And these are just construction deck screws, wood screws you can use. What you can also do is if you only have, like we have quite a bit of the 3-inch, because they've been used on a variety of projects. If you only have the 3-inch, these are good enough as well. They'll just barely get to the bottom of that second board, so you don't want to countersink them too far. You want to just get them flush. What you can also do that we're going to do is on our bottom board, now this isn't our bottom, but just using it for an example, on our bottom board, sometimes, because these boards are so smooth, if you're using it on concrete, when you bring the truck up to it, sometimes they will shift a little bit. That's the other advantage to having a bit of an edge like this, is that your tire is not pushing the square edge. But what I'm going to do is I actually have some leftover carpet that's begun to wear a little bit. Basically a 4x8 foot entrance carpet. And it started to wear. My wife wanted a new carpet, so I got her a new carpet. And I set this aside because it has a rubberized bottom. So what I'm going to plan to do, which is a little tip for you guys, going to cut that carpet up, put 2 pieces on our bottom boards, just so that the rubber base is actually facing the concrete. And that'll just give it a little bit of grip on the concrete itself. As far as measurements go, and I've already given you the hint that we've used a 2x10 by 10 feet long and a 2x10 by 12, and I will post this down below. Here's our measurements, and I threw up the price of the boards for here in Canada. So you can get this project done with basically $50. Where ramps for this size of truck, you're looking at about 130 Canadian to 180 Canadian, depending on the exact ramp that you want. Where with $50, we can get it done in lumber, super supportive, and we don't have to worry, it's going to hold the weight of that 3/4 ton truck. So the 2 piles you see here is actually how Home Depot cut them. And no, Home Depot did not pay me for this. I'm just mentioning because this is the store I purchased it from. This is the 10-foot boards cut up, and this is the 12-foot boards cut up. Now, I am going to cut I've pre-cut this one to show you. Our first step is we're gonna wanna cut our angle on all our board. Okay, I thought I'd just bring you back for a quick tip, and we'll just show you an example of cutting one of the angles. If you're cutting on a 45-degree angle with your skill saw, you're gonna want a little bit of a guideline just to follow to make sure you're going as straight as possible. So you're going to wanna measure in 1.5 inches from the edge of your board, and then just draw out your guideline to actually cut the board itself. And we're going to show you that. Oh, actually, what we're going to do, well, here's a good tip. I'm going to leave this in rather than bring it out. Just as I was drawing that line, I noticed that there's a little splinter here on this corner. So what we're going to do is actually just keep little eyes out for knots, odd edges that might have been broken at some point. So we're going to redo that. 1.5, we're putting that splintered edge down. We could rotate the board as well. And then we're just going to draw our guideline, and our guideline, at least that way, gives us a decent idea. Offset the board out a little, and then it's going to get a little noisy here, so I apologize, but I'll just give you an idea of what it's like cutting that edge and how easy it is. Now, you don't want to rush the cut. You want to take your time, let it be a nice smooth cut. If you rush, then it won't be as smooth, and that gives us a really nice cut, plus preserves as much of the board as possible, because with the 1.5 inch offset, this edge here is actually the bottom flat edge of our original 90-degree on the board itself. And that way, you know, we're not cutting way back here and wasting material. We're getting as much of the board that we want to use. So that's a nice edge right there, and that just takes a couple of minutes to cut. We're going to finish off the couple of boards here, and then we'll bring you back for the assembly. Okay, so we've cut all our angles on our boards. I've loosely put together here what they're going to look like when they're fully assembled. I did forget to mention one item earlier, which I'll mention now. You may want a couple of 2x4s, just cut the same width as your boards to put on the very top board as basically your stop plate, so that as you're bringing the truck up, you're going to feel it come up, 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 little bit of a roll, and then the next little bit of tension you feel is actually your stopper. And you can use 1 2x4 if you're a little concerned about it. You can double them up to have a lot taller height, so it's much more difficult to climb over this. But I think as long as you're paying basic attention, you're going to feel that extra roll, and you know you're at the top if you haven't been counting the jumps that it's actually doing. What we want to do now is we want to make sure that we're pre-drilling our holes before we do the screws, just to prevent it from cracking. And you'll want to pay attention where you're pre-drilling and screwing in your first 2 boards, so that when you put your next board on top, you're not actually drilling in the same spot. Simply shift over. If you need, take some measurements, and then you know exactly. But basically, all you're going to want to do, I'm going to start right about here. And we don't want to go through both boards completely, you want to go through the first board completely and only partially on the second board. A little tip, if you're new and you're worried about drilling too far through because you have a long drill bit, measure out about 2 inches, because that'll take you through your first board, and about a quarter of the way through your second board. Put a little piece of electrical tape at the 2-inch mark, and then you'll be really good. Now, I'm actually going to silence our furnace. We're working inside and the garage is heated. I'm lucky that way, but it's actually just kicking on because it was set a little bit higher. Be right back. Sorry for that interruption. So we're going to find another spot, and again, you can use, if you really want to be precise, you can use your bottom board as a reference point as to where you want to connect them based on length, right? So you could turn around and say, okay, we'll do it right about here, and that way they're also hidden, and we don't want to go too close to the edge. Now, I'm actually going to do 4 points to secure them. And as I mentioned on our first boards, we're going to use the 2.5-inch screws. And that way we're nice and I'm just setting them so that they're flush or just slightly inwards. And then it's simply next process. And as I said, if you want a little tip, we'll move the drill out of the way. You could just put a little mark on the side of your board where you had your screws put in place. Line up your next board, and we're just offsetting, so we're drilling in a different spot. So we just want to offset. We've marked our board below so that we know where to put the next set of screws. Again, there's our mark, so we'll come maybe a little further back here. Now we're going to use our 3-inch screws. That'll give us lots of grab on this layer. Go. And it's just a continuing process. Now this is our final board. So we have 4 layers, 1.5 inches. That's going to give us 6 inches of rise, which is going to be really nice. Again, right? We want to cheat. We can make a mark where our screws were. Place our board down, and we just move our position for the next set of screws. And you can see how quick and easy this is actually coming together. So it's a very straightforward project, If you're not used to working with tools, maybe you're developing your skills, maybe you want to have a young child or a grandson help you out, or granddaughter. This would be a perfect project, you know, if my daughters were younger, that I could use so they get comfortable in working with power tools, which is always a great thing to do with young kids. So down the road, when they're off on their own, they actually have some of these basic skills. And I'm a firm believer of that because I've got photos of both my daughters under their cars changing oil, not using a lift. But great experience for them to learn. And then our final portion is actually just taking our 2x4, and we're going to want to do the same thing, just drill in the actual 2x4. Now I didn't mark where the screw below was. I know I just had it offset a little further back from where the center of the 2x4 is, and that's why I'm actually doing that. And then and there we go. Now what we'll do is we'll do the second set, put it together, but for all intensive purposes, there is our ramp. If you wanted, if you're going to be moving these around a lot, you could put a handle off to the side, whether you're using a cabinetry handle or a heavy handle. You could use some cord as well. I'm not going to bother with that because these really probably will never really move more than 1 or 2 bays over in my garage because they'll be here for the truck. And there's a bit of weight, but not a ton of weight. You can pick them up, move them around, and that way they're at your fingertips. When I store them, likely what I will do is take the one ramp, flip it upside down, and slide it over the second ramp, potentially just to interlock them, depending where they're going. What we'll do next, I'll finish the second set, and I'll bring you back, and we'll actually put the truck up on the ramps so that you can get a good look at what they look like in actual use. Okay, I'm out of frame because I wanted to set the camera up. Let's actually put the truck up on the ramps, and that way you can see what they're like. And there we go. So that just gave you a little idea of how they went up. Now, if you have a 4x4 truck, to help keep the ramps from sliding a little bit, like I mentioned, I really liked. I don't think they shifted whatsoever. I couldn't feel that with the carpet underneath, with the rubber facing down on the concrete. I think they worked really well. I do recommend, if you have a spotter, just have a spotter so when you reach that last point, you're really paying attention. If you have a big heavy-duty truck like this that puts out a lot of horsepower and torque, it's a little harder to feel every jump because the truck naturally wants to just push forward. So a spotter is always an extra safe thing, or at least make sure you have clearance in the front. Heaven forbid you rolled off the ramp. But we're ready to go. We can do an oil change right now if we wanted. We could get underneath, grease any of the suspension nipples, do any kind of work that we want just because the bed is the truck is now actually lifted and giving us really good clearance. So that's pretty much the end of our video. I just want to thank you guys. Thanks for watching the video. I hope it's been helpful if you're thinking of undertaking a project like this. If you like the video, please click the like button. Please hit the subscribe, and if you hit the little notification bell, you'll be notified as we bring you more videos on DIY truck upgrades, like we've posted in the past, maybe some test drives, and then we're going to bring you some RV content as well, and just some useful information in general. Anyways, leave me your comments below. Thanks again for watching and making the channel what it is. Take care, everyone.